Have you ever felt that the world has become far too silent? As if something had died, but no one had the courage to name the corpse. There is a void hanging over the century. A strange silence, not the silence of peace, but of absence. For centuries, the human being lived supported by a promise. The promise that there was meaning, that the good would be rewarded, that life had a purpose written in the stars. God was the center. And around that center revolved morality, truth, love, destiny. But one day a man looked up at the sky and realized the sky was empty. That man was Friedrich Nietzsche. Nietzsche did not announce the death of God with pride. He did not kill God with his own hands. He simply looked at the world and stated, God was already dead, and we were his murderers. Nietzsche's God is dead is not an attack on faith. It is a mirror, a cruel, cold mirror that reflects what we have become. What he saw was not the triumph of atheism, but the collapse of meaning. Nietzsche did not destroy God. He described the death of a belief, the crumbling of a structure that had sustained the West for 2,000 years. And when God falls, everything falls with him. Truth ceases to be absolute. Morality loses the ground beneath it. Life seems to lose its purpose. Suddenly man finds himself alone in the universe, without a compass, without a north, without eternity. And that is where tragedy begins, and liberation. Nietzsche looks at us and says, we were the ones who killed God. We killed him with our science, with our doubt, with our progress. But who will give us water to wash this blood away? That question echoes to this day. We live in a time when technology brings us closer, but the soul is farther away than ever. We have answers for everything, but we no longer know why we are here. We know how to live, but we have forgotten what for. Nietzsche saw what the future would bring. He saw a modern man walking toward the void, laughing at faith and kneeling before nothingness. For him, what we call the death of God was not the disappearance of a divinity, but the death of the absolute. The end of belief in eternal truths, in a universal good, in a common purpose. God, he said, was the metaphor of meaning. And when meaning died, man had to face the abyss of his own freedom. The death of God did not set man free. It threw him into chaos. Nietzsche wrote in The Gay Science, God is dead. God remains dead, and we have killed him. How shall we comfort ourselves, the murderers of all murderers? It is the lament of someone who understands the weight of his own conscience. Nietzsche is not celebrating. He is weeping. Because he knows that with the death of God, everything becomes possible. And at the same time, nothing makes sense. Humanity enters a spiritual desert. And in the desert, there are no longer commandments. There are choices. No longer a heaven, there is responsibility. Nietzsche knew, when there is no longer a higher truth, each human being must become a creator of values, a creator of meaning, a creator of oneself. But few can bear such freedom. Most prefer the slavery of certainties. They prefer the comfort of dogma to the vertigo of thought. And that is why Nietzsche said that modern man is a weak being, a domesticated animal, chained to the morality he himself created. He called this prison the morality of slaves, a morality born of fear, of the need for order, of the inability to affirm life with all its pain. For Nietzsche, man was not born to obey. He was born to create. But creation demands courage, the courage to lose the ground beneath your feet. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Nietzsche announces the arrival of a new kind of man, the Overman, Übermensch. Not a superior being in the biological sense, but a free, autonomous being, capable of creating his own value without depending on heavenly commandments. The Overman is the one who says yes to life, even to pain, to loss, to suffering. He accepts chaos and turns it into strength. He dances over the abyss. Nietzsche believed that human greatness is not in fleeing tragedy, but in affirming it, in looking at suffering and saying, yes, it is part of me. He said, I want to learn more and more to see as beautiful what is necessary in things. Then I shall be one of those who make things beautiful. This is the essence of his thought. Amor Fati, the love of fate. To love not only what is good, but everything that is, including what hurts. But before loving fate, one must face solitude. And Nietzsche knew solitude like few others. From a young age, he was a restless spirit, always on the margins of institutions, churches, academies. He loved music, philosophy, Greek tragedy, but he hated conformism. At 24, he became a university professor, a prodigy, but his body was fragile, his mind far too intense. Between migraine attacks and feverish visions, Nietzsche wrote as one who bleeds. His words are not theories, they are open wounds. He did not want disciples. He wanted to awaken thinkers. He did not want faith. He wanted lucidity. Over time, Nietzsche realized that the modern world was building new gods: money, progress, science, reason. But all of that, he said, was disguised idolatry. And man, in trying to replace God with human idols, did not free himself. He merely exchanged cages. Whoever fights with monsters should see to it that he does not thereby become a monster. Nietzsche knew that the search for power, success and truth can turn us into prisoners of our own ambition, and that true freedom does not lie in conquering the world, but in conquering oneself. God is dead is, at bottom, a calling to responsibility, to creation, to courage. Nietzsche is saying, now that God has died, it is your turn to create the meaning of existence, and that task is terrible, because it demands spiritual maturity. It demands bearing the weight of your own conscience. It demands looking in the mirror and admitting, I am the author of my life. Nietzsche believed that few would bear this burden, and he was right. We live surrounded by distractions, but empty inside. We want freedom, but we fear its price. The death of God is not the end. It is the beginning of something new, the birth of man as creator. Nietzsche said, we must still have chaos in ourselves to give birth to a dancing star. This chaos is freedom, and from it are born art, philosophy, music, thought, everything that makes us human. Nietzsche saw the collapse of the old world, but also the birth of a new one, a world in which man would have to reinvent himself. There would be no more promised heaven, but there would be the possibility of turning life into a work of art. He said, become who you are, and perhaps that is the true meaning of his phrase, God is dead, but the divine remains alive, within us. The man who killed God did not do it out of hatred, but out of love for truth. Nietzsche believed that only by destroying illusions could we build something true. He did not want a world without spirituality. He wanted a world where the spirit would be free, and for that he paid a very high price. Solitude, illness, madness, but also eternity, because even dead Nietzsche keeps speaking to us, and his voice echoes like thunder through the corridors of the soul. Do you still want a God? Then learn first to be a man, the void. That is what Nietzsche was speaking of when he announced the death of God, a void that cannot be seen, but can be felt. A silence that screams within the human soul. What happens to man when he realizes there is no longer a heaven above his head? When he understands that no one will come to save him? That there is no secret plan written in some divine dimension? What happens is nihilism. Nietzsche called nihilism the most unsettling of all guests. It does not arrive with violence. It arrives with a whisper. It enters slowly, through the cracks of fatigue, when faith no longer consoles, and reason no longer satisfies. Nihilism is the experience of perceiving that nothing has meaning, and yet continuing to live. Nietzsche saw nihilism as a dangerous abyss, but also as a portal. A point of transition between the death of ancient certainties and the birth of a new consciousness. For him, nihilism is the fever before the cure. The dark night before the dawn. When man loses his illusions, he suffers. He feels fear, but it is in that suffering that the potential for transformation is born. Nietzsche said, the desert grows. Woe to him who hides deserts within. The desert is the metaphor of nihilism, an arid, aimless space where everything seems to die, but where the essential can bloom. Nietzsche did not want to save us from nihilism. He wanted us to cross it. He wanted us to live it to the end, to the point where pain is transformed into creation. He believed that man only awakens when he loses everything, and that one must die many times. Die to what one believes, die to what one fears, die to what defines us, to finally be born. But few can bear that. Modern man prefers to anesthetize the void with distractions. He seeks pleasure, power, Fame, anything that prevents the silence from screaming. Nietzsche observed this tendency and foresaw what would come after God, the herd society. He said that when man lost transcendental meaning, he would seek refuge in collective comfort. He would begin to follow the crowd, to think as everyone thinks, to desire what everyone desires, and this would be the new danger, the death of the individual. For Nietzsche, the herd is the symbol of mediocrity. The man who follows the herd is the one who does not want to think, does not want to decide, does not want to create. He wants only safety. But, he said, the path to freedom passes through solitude. The free spirit is the opposite of the man of the herd. He is the one who has the courage to walk alone, to look into the abyss without averting his eyes, to doubt everything, even himself. Nietzsche knew that to be free is dangerous, because the free person has nowhere to lean. True freedom is vertigo, and most prefer the solid ground of obedience. But the free spirit is the one who dares. He is not satisfied with ready-made truths. He does not seek salvation. He seeks lucidity. He is the man who, before the ruins of the gods, says, I create my own meaning. Nietzsche believed this would be the future of humanity. A person capable of bearing the lack of meaning, and, even so, affirming life. A person who does not flee from pain, but transforms it into wisdom. A person who does not worship the past nor fear the future, because he lives entirely in the present. But before the free spirit is born, comes chaos. Nietzsche said that every age has its illness, and the illness of his time was spiritual decadence. Modern man, he said, had become weak. Weak not in body, but in soul. Christianity, in his reading, had taught man to renounce life, to see suffering as punishment, to await paradise as reward. But for Nietzsche, that was a form of escape, a denial of existence, a cult of weakness. He did not attack the historical Christ, but the system that turned life into guilt. Christianity is a morality of slaves, he said. It teaches obedience, submission, the negation of will. Nietzsche wanted the opposite, a morality that would affirm life, that would celebrate the will, that would recognize suffering as part of growth. And thus his philosophy of the will to power was born. The will to power is not the will to dominate others. It is the will to affirm one's own existence. It is the vital impulse that moves all of nature. It is what makes a flower break through asphalt, what makes an artist create, what makes a man keep fighting even without hope. Nietzsche believed the will to power was the true motor of life. When it weakens, decadence is born. When it flourishes, the creator is born. The free spirit is the one in whom the will to power overflows. He needs no commandments, no approval. He is his own law, his own judge, his own creator. But to reach that state, Nietzsche knew that man would have to cross the inner hell, and that hell has a name, eternal return. Imagine. Nietzsche said that everything you live, every moment, every pain, every joy, every mistake, and every victory will repeat infinitely, exactly the same way. Would you accept to live it again? Would you accept to relive every second of your life eternally without changing anything? This is the question that divides the weak from the strong. The weak man curses life. The strong one blesses it. The eternal return is the supreme test. It asks, do you love life so much that you would want to live it again, infinitely many times? Nietzsche called this stance Amor Fati, the love of fate. To love not only pleasure but also pain. To love not only success but failure. To love life exactly as it is. This is the secret of the free spirit. He does not want to change the world. He wants to affirm the world. But who can love like that? Who can look at chaos and call it home? Nietzsche believed that such strength is born only after destruction. When everything falls, when all illusions die, when man is left only with his own conscience, that is where the true creator is born. And that is why he said, one must still have chaos in oneself to give birth to a dancing star. Chaos is not the enemy. It is the cradle of creation. Nietzsche knew that the human soul is like the universe, full of disorder but also of possibilities, and that the role of the philosopher, of the artist, of the thinker, is to turn chaos into form, pain into beauty, despair into wisdom. He saw the philosopher as an artist of life, and philosophy not as theory but as style. As a way of existing, Nietzsche said, without music, life would be a mistake. And he was not speaking only of literal music, but of the inner music, the harmony between pain and joy, between reason and instinct, between finitude and eternity. He believed that living is like composing. You must find the rhythm, accept the dissonances, turn noise into melody. But the world did not understand Nietzsche. They called him mad, blasphemous, a destroyer. Few realized that behind the provocation there was a call to greatness. Nietzsche did not want the end of spirituality. He wanted its rebirth. He did not want chaos for the sake of destruction, but chaos as a creative principle. He did not want despair. He wanted courage. Nihilism was for him the bridge. A dangerous crossing, but necessary. God is dead is not the end of faith. It is the beginning of consciousness. Imagine yourself in Nietzsche's place. You look at the world and see ruins, empty churches, corroded values, broken truths. And even so, you choose to say yes, you choose to live, to create, to affirm. That is what Nietzsche teaches us. Not to deny God, but to discover the divine within us. The man who killed God is not the murderer of faith. He is the midwife of a new humanity. Nietzsche reached that point. He went to the limit of human thought. And on the other side, he found silence. Nietzsche's madness was not a sudden collapse. It was the price of a soul that dared to see what no one else saw. For years, he fought against violent pains, vision crises, loneliness, rejection. But what destroyed him inside was not only illness, it was the weight of consciousness. He saw the world with a clarity that burned. And when you see too much, reality ceases to have walls. Nietzsche looked into the abyss, and the abyss replied. In January 1889 in Turin, a man walked through the streets. It was Nietzsche. Seeing a horse being whipped, he approached. He embraced the animal. He wept. And he collapsed. There, in the middle of the street, the mind of one of humanity's greatest philosophers broke. From that day on, Nietzsche never returned. For 11 years, he lived in silence. Under the care of his mother and then his sister, he no longer wrote, no longer spoke. He merely existed among shadows and memories. But that silence was not empty. It was a silence that echoed. Nietzsche had crossed the hell of consciousness. And on the other side, he left an inheritance, a calling to all who still dare to think. Nietzsche's madness is symbolic. It represents the point where the human touches the divine, and the price for touching the infinite. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, he had written, "One day man will be surpassed as the ape was surpassed by man." Perhaps he tried to surpass himself too soon. Perhaps he went too far inside himself. And when you dive so deep into your own soul, you may not find the way back. Nietzsche did not go mad because he was weak. He went mad because he saw too much, because he felt too much, because he understood that having lost God, man would now have to bear the burden of being his own creator. But what he left was not despair. It was fire. He turned suffering into art, pain into wisdom, solitude into transcendence. Few philosophers were such poets, and few poets were such philosophers. He said, "He who has a why to live for can bear almost any how." That sentence was written while he struggled against constant pain. While the body fell apart, the soul still created. Nietzsche did not believe in redemption, but he believed in transformation. For him, salvation does not come from outside. It comes from the courage to face one's own hell. He turned thought into art and philosophy into confession. When he said, "God is dead," he was not destroying hope. He was inviting us to create a new one. A hope made of lucidity, of inner strength, of radical acceptance of life. Nietzsche said the true philosopher is not the one who seeks the truth, but the one who lives the truth, even if it hurts. And he lived. He lived to the ultimate consequences. Imagine being alone in the world, without faith, without love, without recognition, blind, sick, misunderstood, and even so, believing that life is worth it. Nietzsche did that. He believed that meaning is not something received, but something created. Even when everything breaks, the soul can still dance. "What does not kill me makes me stronger." He wrote that line not as a slogan, but as survival. It was his prayer. Nietzsche believed that pain is necessary, that suffering is the fire that purifies the soul, that only those who suffer deeply can create something true. He said, "Great pains are the ultimate liberators of the spirit," and that is exactly what he lived. Each pain freed him from an illusion, Each loss brought him closer to essence, until, in the end, nothing was left, neither words, nor concepts, nor philosophy. Only silence. But in Nietzsche's silence there was eternity. Because a spirit that burns like that does not disappear. It becomes light. Today, more than a century later, Nietzsche remains alive. In classrooms, in restless minds, in hearts that still seek meaning in a world without direction, he is the philosopher who offers no comfort, but offers courage. The courage to look chaos in the face and say, I affirm. Nietzsche did not want man to believe in anything. He wanted him to believe in himself. He wanted humanity to cease being a herd and become creative. He wanted each person to be a living work of art, made of contradictions, of falls, of rebirths. Become who you are. This is his legacy, the sentence that sums up an entire life. To be who one is, and without masks, without guilt, without fear. Nietzsche was the man who killed God. But he was also the man who planted the seed of a new divine. A divine not in heaven, but within the human being. He did not destroy the sacred. He freed it. In Nietzsche, God does not die entirely. He transforms. He leaves the beyond and returns into life. Transcendence ceases to be escape and becomes creation. Nietzsche invites us to replace obedience with conscience, guilt with strength, blind faith with lucidity. He does not want believers. He wants creators. Nietzsche, the man who killed God. But perhaps he did not kill God. Perhaps he merely showed that God was too alive to fit inside a church. Nietzsche was the prophet of a new era. An era in which the human being must learn to be divine, without needing heaven, without needing promises, without needing spiritual crutches. To be divine, for Nietzsche, is to be a creator. To affirm life, to embrace destiny, to love chaos. In the end, Nietzsche was not just a philosopher. He was a human experience taken to the extreme, a mirror of the modern soul, a man who dared to think the unthinkable, to feel the unbearable, and to live the impossible. He was the first to understand that, without God, man is not condemned, he is free, and that freedom is terrible and beautiful. It demands courage, but it also gives us back the power to be authors of our own destiny. Nietzsche died in 1900 without knowing he had become immortal. His ideas crossed the century and shaped modern thought. They inspired Freud, Jung, Heidegger, Foucault, Sartre, Camus, all in some way children of his cry. And even today, when the world seems empty, when meaning dissolves, when faith is lost, Nietzsche's voice echoes, God is dead. But what kind of man will arise to replace God? This is the question that remains alive, the question every human being must answer. Nietzsche left us a dangerous inheritance, consciousness, and a silent promise. That meaning is not lost. It is waiting for whoever has the courage to create it. He was the man who killed God, but also the man who taught us to resurrect the spirit. And now, the question is yours. Would you be capable of living what Nietzsche lived? Would you bear the weight of freedom? Would you dare to create your own God within yourself? Silence. After the scream comes silence. But it is not the silence of the end. It is the silence of rebirth. Nietzsche believed that life is an endless cycle of destruction and creation. Everything that dies prepares the ground for what is to come. Everything that falls opens space for the new to grow. Just as stars are born from collapse, the soul also expands out of pain. The death of God is not only the end of faith, it is the beginning of a new consciousness. Nietzsche did not kill God out of hatred, but because he knew that man needed to grow. While God lived on high, man remained small, kneeling, awaiting orders. But now, without God, man is forced to rise, to walk on his own, to create meaning, morality, destiny, and it is in that act of creation that the human approaches the divine. Nietzsche did not kill God. He brought him back to earth. He transformed the divine into inner power. He made man the artist of his own universe. We live in a world that still feels the echo of that death. The 20th century was the proof. Wars, ideologies, tyrannies, voids. Nietzsche foresaw it all. When man kills God and creates nothing in his place, he becomes prey to nihilism. He searches for new gods, money, power, progress, ego. He builds iron idols and algorithms that decide for him. He trades the temple of faith for the temple of reason, and forgets that reason, without soul, also goes mad. Nietzsche cried out against this before everyone. He saw that the greatest danger of the future would be the death of the human within man. He who fights with monsters should take care not to become a monster. That sentence is a warning. When we try to eliminate mystery, we end up eliminating the sacred. And without the sacred, the world becomes flat, predictable, empty. Nietzsche wanted to restore mystery, not religious mystery, but the mystery of existence. He wanted man to be enchanted again. Not by miracles, but by life itself, by the sunrise, by the sound of rain, by laughter and weeping, by the simple fact of existing. He said, "I love him who wants to create beyond himself, to create something beyond oneself. That is what modern man lacks." Nietzsche did not want a satisfied humanity, but a humanity in flames. He dreamed of the Overman, not a superior being, but an awakened one. Someone who lives with fullness, who accepts the tragic, who turns suffering into strength. But the Overman is not born of theories. He is born of fire, of friction, of experience. Nietzsche knew there is no enlightenment without darkness, no wisdom without pain, no freedom without loss, and that is why his philosophy is so demanding. It does not console. It challenges. It burns everything that is false. Nietzsche is the fire that purifies, and that fire still burns in every soul that dares to think on its own. Look at today's world. Humanity still walks upon the ruins of its own gods. We live surrounded by information, but starving for meaning. We have freedom, but we do not know what to do with it. Nietzsche remains the prophet of this time. He speaks to those who are tired of following scripts, to those who feel something is missing, even when everything seems complete. Because the void is not the end. It is the beginning of creation. When everything loses meaning, it is because the time has come to create a new one. Nietzsche wanted each human being to be a creator, not of imaginary worlds, but of oneself.